Go as quietly as possible. Do not make a sound until I tell you to run.
On the morning of March 6, 1890, Eugene Shieffelin released the first of 100 starlings into Central Park. This small act significantly impacted the balance of agricultural, ecological, and economic landscapes in North America, and changed the way we as a society view native and non-native species. Starlings. Sturnus vulgaris. I'm sure you've heard of them. #1 nuisance bird in North America. Doesn't ring a bell? Let me remind you. The starling, originally native to Europe, now flies in flocks of over 1,000 called murmurs. With black bodies and white spots, these birds have managed to put 4 different native species on the endangered list. So, why is the European songbird one of the most common U.S. birds? It all starts with a man and his love of Shakespearean avians, or so the story goes. Eugene Shieffelin, a German immigrant and pharmacist living in Bronx Borough, New York City, became chairman of the American Acclimatization Society in 1877. First established in 1871, the American Acclimatization Society sought to introduce flora and fauna to the American continent. Acclimatization societies were not uncommon in this era and used by European settlers all across the globe. We can see the effects of these societies with rabbits overrunning the continent of Australia, feral hogs tearing up the Americas, and domesticated cats eliminating entire wildlife species worldwide. The goals of the settlers were to add familiarity and comfort to the New World. An article published November 15, 1877, addressed the expanse at which the American Acclimatization Society hoped to spread their creatures. The article mentioned efforts to introduce the English titmouse, the chaffinch, the blackbird, the robin, and the skylark. It's rumored that Eugene Shieffelin aspired to introduce all the birds of William Shakespeare's plays. In Henry V, Shakespeare writes, "Nay, he said he would not ransom Mortimer, forbade my tongue to speak of Mortimer, but I will find him when he lies asleep, and in his ear I'll holla, Mortimer. Nay, I'll have a starling, shall be taught to speak, nothing but Mortimer, and give it to him, to keep his anger still in motion." This happens to be the only mention of starlings in all of Shakespeare's works, and so it goes, on March 6, 1890, Eugene and a few other men from the society freed the first 40 of 100 starlings released into Central Park. Unlike the other birds the society set to introduce, 16 of the songbirds survived. By perching under the roof of the American Museum of Natural History, the birds were able to make it through the rough winter. Now over 2 million starlings inhabit the land from Alaska to Mexico. Most of the introductions that were made by these societies failed miserably, Kevin McGowan of the Laboratory of Ornithology at Cornell University states. Unfortunately, we can see that this was not the case for these creatures. The impact of the starlings has changed agriculture, ecology, and economics here in the United States for centuries to come. Agriculture. The science or practice of farming, including cultivation of the soil for the growing of crops and the rearing of animals to provide food, wool, and other products. A survey done in 2012 states that these birds do over $189 million worth of damage in just 5 different types of fruit trees. In winter, a flock of 1,000 starlings can eat 1.5 tons of cattle feed, about $250,000 US. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, starlings are one of the top 100 world's worst invasive species. It's estimated that they do over $800 million worth of agricultural damage each year. When large numbers of these birds roost in the same area, their droppings can contaminate the soil, resulting in the release of fungal spores into the air. When breathed in, these spores can cause histoplasmosis, a respiratory illness that in extreme cases can cause blindness or even death. I spoke with Zach Myers, a dairy farmer for over 25 years. He said,
"At times we would have some calves to get sick. The condition that's called scoured, and that would eventually they would die from."
What makes starlings particularly insidious is that they pick out the finest quality grains, which causes a reduction in dairy output because the cows aren't getting the nutrients they need, says George Linz, a wildlife biologist at the USDA National Wildlife Research Center. Ecology, the branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. Starlings have been known to bully other birds out of their nests. Starlings are cavity nesters, meaning they live in small holes dug into the ground or in trees. The problem with this is that starlings have no ability to create those holes, meaning they must kick out other birds such as woodpeckers, bluebirds, purple martins, and sapsuckers. Kevin McGowan says, but there aren't many holes out there, so the competition is intense, and European starlings are really good competitors. And that's the single biggest problem. They outcompete all native hole nesters. Economy, the wealth and resources of a country or region, especially in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services. Starling reports from the USDA Wildlife Service estimates $2 million a year in economic damages, but that only scratches the surface of the debt owed by these creatures. Multiple plane crashes have been due to starling activity. An aircraft accident report from July 31, 1962 says that out of the 72 passengers on Flight 5533 departing from Boston on October 4, 1960, only 10 survived. Out of the 10 that survived, 9 of them received serious injuries. A few seconds after becoming airborne, the aircraft struck a flock of starlings, taking out both of its engines. They're a particular problem at airports because they flock in very large numbers, and compared to other birds, their bodies are very dense. They're about 27% more dense than a herring gull, which is a much larger bird, says Michael Bazier, National Coordinator for the U.S. Department of Agriculture Airports Wildlife Hazard Program. Starlings are responsible for over 6% of all bird-related airport crashes. Because of their recent arrival, all starlings have a very similar genetic code. Genetically, a starling from Pennsylvania is nearly identical to starlings tested in Washington, nearly 2,500 miles away. Such little genetic variation often causes trouble for species like these, but seems to have no ill effect on the starlings thus far. For years, people have attempted to drive starlings out of North America. Everything has been tried to minimize the damage of these birds. Devices like speakers, rockets, poison, shooting, and trapping are some of the more common approaches used to eradicate them. Starlings are one of the only birds in America unprotected by the law. They have become so hunted that poisons like starlicide are named in their honor. There have been doubts about the factuality of Eugene's Shakespearean love. Some say it was a myth, a fable told by scientists and nature lovers. An article written by Duke University considers it a part of birding folklore. To sum it up, the Shakespeare tale may have been exaggerated, or even fabricated, but there is no doubt that the mustachioed eccentric Eugene Shieffelin was the man that released 100 starlings into Central Park. And those very birds multiplied into the disastrous, destructive pests that now terrorize North America. It was the starling that permanently changed our economic, ecological, and agricultural growth. This event marks the beginning of an ongoing war between native and non-native species, one of the first publicized outbreaks in North America. The release of the starlings taught us an important lesson about the dangers of interrupting the ecosystems. As the world continues to change around us, we must be ready to learn from the mistakes of our past to guarantee a brighter future. Eugene Shieffelin's tale is a cautionary one, allowing us to better the way we perceive native and non-native species. And it all began March 6th, 1890, the day Eugene Shieffelin decided to make history.